with that, we're going to shift gears out of the end user side of things, and we're going to take a look at the application design components available within AgilePoint. So one of the foundational elements in AgilePoint is what we call data entity. So you can think of this as a citizen developer oriented data designer. Rather than have your end users design their tables in SQL Server Management Studio, I can always design them here via point and click. So with that, data entity is actually comprised of two components. The first of which are entities themselves. You can think of these as tables. The other side of this product are pick lists. You can think of this as a standard set of values for drop-down lists, or in database terminology, enumerated values. Now within AgilePoint, we're going to give you a generous allotment of out-of-the-box entities for common business objects. Here as an example, you're seeing I have an object for cases. Within this object, I have various fields. Things like the account name that the case belongs to, case number, case owner, contact details as an example. And all of these can be easily built out via point and click. So the process that I might follow to add a new column is first categorize this column. You're seeing here a variety of column types, each of which have their own validation and easily configurable properties. So for instance, if I wanted to add an alternate phone number, I would select the phone category. I would give it a display name. An internal name gets generated as a result. And then I have field-specific configuration properties. Now, just like any other database, I can always create relationships. I can easily view the data associated with a table, manage granular permissions, see everywhere this table is used in an application, and even view the audit trail for this table. Now, if we go back to the home screen here, I will point out that one of the new additions in AgilePoint version 8 has been the ability to automatically create tables based on Excel sheet imports. So as an example, if I wanted to automatically create a table, I would click on Import Entity. And as you can see here, I can create an entity based on various file formats. The new addition in version 8 is to create via Excel sheet. So here I have some brief descriptions and instructions for creating these tables. I would select my file and then click Import. If you'd like to see more on this, we do have a detailed discussion on this topic in the Build Your First Data Entity video. So be sure to check that out if you'd like to see more on this feature. Okay, so that concludes data entity. And just keep in mind, this is primarily citizen developer oriented, right? It is not a required element to use as a part of your applications. And in fact, in the next few moments, you're going to see a deeper discussion on AgilePoint's very deep integration framework. Before we get to that point, let's walk through some of the first few steps of building a new application. So here, with citizen development in mind, we've implemented a checklist or questionnaire style dialog. So AgilePoint is going to ask me a series of questions about my application, and it's going to configure it accordingly. So the first question I'm asked here is, what sort of application am I building? There's discussion here around the various types of applications, but it essentially amounts to, do I require workflow, approvals, or notifications? In that case, we would go with process-based app. If I wanted to create a survey, a checklist, or simply have an interface on top of some backend data source for CRUD operations, then I would go with form-based app. So we'll give my app a name. You'll notice here under language, I can select my preferred language in which I would like to design the application, which is distinct from creating multilingual apps. I'll drop my application into a category. I'll give my process model a name here. I can optionally input a description. But my next major decision point here is, how does this application initiate? So you're seeing a number of options here on screen, and additional trigger types can always be created as a part of AgilePoint's extension framework. But here you're seeing eForms as our default option. This essentially means that when a user opens up a form, they enter data and click submit, that starts the business process. I don't need to use AgilePoint's form technology. In fact, I can always use my own UI and simply integrate with AgilePoint from an API perspective to drive the workflow. A number of automated triggers, such as inbound email, file drop, database insert, calling an API as a part of a process, integration between parent and child processes, as well as dedicated event support for SharePoint, Salesforce, and InfoPath. Next, AgilePoint will ask me, where will I store the data as a part of this application? And as you're seeing here on screen, I have a variety of options depending on my skill set. Citizen developers may find it easier to take existing data and simply build the application around it, in which case I might choose data entity, databases like Oracle, SQL Server, and MySQL, standard and custom Salesforce objects, SharePoint lists, or based on an Excel sheet. Whereas professional developers may opt to go with a blank data source and simply build the data model on the fly, where 5 fields might come from SAP, another 5 from Salesforce, and yet another 5 from a database. For our example here, let's use one of AgilePoint's built-in data entity tables. I'll give my data source a name here. And to make my custom table easier to find, I'm going to filter based on custom entities only. We'll select my table. As you can see here, AgilePoint is automatically going to synchronize the data with the application. Under fields, I can unselect certain fields if I don't need them, and then can bring over all related child tables. Now, as a last step, and all of these elements can always be added later on or as needed, we've brought together a list of all of the common application artifacts that we tend to see. So by that I mean creating access tokens or connection strings to external systems. If I'm uploading files as a part of an application, where will those files live? Implementing style sheets, groups and roles, images, and JavaScript. And then lastly, before we begin building our application, I have the users for this particular application. So over the next few moments, AgilePoint is going to begin assembling my application, and it's going to drop me into the application designer. Now we'll spend a few more moments in the process designer here in just a moment, but to show you how to get started, from the left-hand side, I'm going to select my start task. A start task is the first step in any business process and provides the user interface to initiate the workflow. Now here, I'm going to start from a completely blank canvas, but do keep in mind that AgilePoint promotes reusability at all levels of the application. So I can always reuse elements that I've built in another app for my current application. So what AgilePoint is doing now is it's dropping me into the UI designer. Right? Again, we'll walk through all of the elements at your disposal in just a moment, but wanted to highlight from a citizen developer's perspective the ease of use and just how easily I can get started. On the right-hand side, I've associated tables with my application. In my case, I chose data entity, but it's going to have a very similar experience if you'd like to build an app around a database table, SharePoint list, or Salesforce object of some type. So now, as a citizen developer, I just arrange the various fields on the right place on my form and have complete control over the layout of this form. But you'll notice here that simply via point and click, I can rearrange, I can span columns across multiple sections, right? Again, all via point and click. What's more, you're noticing these little blue database icons in each field. This essentially shows that I've created a data-bound relationship between my form and whatever my external data source happens to be, so that as a citizen developer, I just worry about laying out the form, and AgilePoint wires up all of the data integrations on my behalf. Now, I won't drag over all of the fields here, but I do want to highlight the intelligence as I'm dropping these fields onto my form. You'll notice here that in dropping the child table, AgilePoint has recognized that this is going to be a repeating section. So as a result, it gives me a choice of repeating controls: subform, grid, and comments. So I can span this subform all the way across. I can add a few more columns, and then begin designing my subform in the same manner. Not only that, but for all of the other controls that I've previously dropped, AgilePoint has suggested the appropriate control for the data type. By that I mean when I dragged over the phone field, AgilePoint is suggesting the phone control to use as a result. Similarly, here with the email control. Okay, so I wanted to get us started here in building an application. Let's take a few moments and transition into an application that's a little more built out. So I've switched gears here into another application. As you're seeing here, this deals with requesting IT services. And let's just take a bigger look at the application here. So what you're seeing on screen are a combination of human activities as well as system activities. Some of these are inserting records into a database, while others are called conditions and control the process flow. So how did we get to this point? Right? Well, one of the strength areas of AgilePoint is having a very large integration and activity framework. By that I mean, here I have more than 70 systems that are pre-integrated into the platform with very deep integration in each. And across all of the systems that you're seeing here on screen, there are more than 700 easily configurable workflow activities. So let's take a look at the list here. You're seeing things like Active Directory, RPA from Box, RPA from UiPath, Blue Prism as an example, document management services, databases, CRM, and ERP. And for each of these, right, as we mentioned, the integration is quite deep, meaning that I don't need to understand the complexities of these underlying systems. I simply need to know how to drag and drop and configure. So by that I mean, right, let's take Salesforce as an example. You're seeing here I have an activity for creating a record. So let's walk through the configuration process here. And though my example is Salesforce, it's going to follow the exact same process for any of the 70 systems that AgilePoint supports. So my first step here is how am I connecting to my external system? AgilePoint relies on the concept of access tokens, which your IT department may set up on your behalf. Once I've selected my connection string, you're seeing here a list of all potential entities, both standard and custom objects, that I can create as a part of a workflow. So in our case here, let's create a lead. And you're seeing here a request mapping screen. So in this case here, as a developer, I simply pass the data from the AgilePoint side to my external system, in this case, Salesforce. So if I were to scroll down here, I would say I want to pass the employee name to the name field. And we'll take the phone to the phone field. And I would follow this exact same process for as many fields as applicable. Okay, so with that being said, let's take a look at the UI designer. So here you're seeing a responsive HTML5 and jQuery's forms technology, right, with lots of pre-built elements to easily design my user interfaces. On the left-hand side, I have my toolbox. Here I have more than 65 easily configurable UI elements, each of which have their own validation built in. So here you're going to see examples of things like text boxes, headings, checkboxes and file upload controls, date and time, currency, the repeating element, right, the subform that I showed you just a few moments back, as well as auto-suggest. Now under advanced controls, they become a little more specific, right? So things like phone numbers, where I can validate for a local phone number, US-based phone number, or international format. Email and social security, credit card details, as well as lookups to external systems. And then lastly, under Telerik, you're seeing here a number of Telerik controls that we've OEM'd and brought into the platform at no cost. Now this form here is primarily out of the box, but I can always apply my own CSS per form or for the entire application. Similarly here with JavaScript, per form or for the entire app. And I have built-in testing tools so that I can test my integrations and logic without having to deploy anything. As an example here, you're seeing under my service request information section a variety of dropdowns, and I'm expecting a cascading sort of effect where the selections made in one field drive the available options in the second field. So let's select access request as an example, and you'll notice here that a new field has become available. When I select access, my next question is, does this pertain to a new user or an existing user? If I change the values here in that first dropdown, again, you'll notice that my form is dynamic and is displaying the appropriate results in the second dropdown list. Now, how did we get to that point? Well, AgilePoint enables logic at multiple levels of the application, everything from the individual field level, the form level, or the entire app itself. Regardless, I build my logic the exact same way. At the top here, I have my condition. So I've dragged fields from my form, implemented an operator, and then the value that I'm expecting. And then when that condition is met, what sorts of actions am I taking? So here, you're seeing things like showing and hiding controls, but I can also execute scripts and methods, set values like dates and field values, mark something as mandatory, or trigger a lookup to an external system. And then lastly here, before we move on, though this is a responsive UI designer, I do have device and orientation specific layout tooling. This is often going to be an unnecessary step as the responsive nature takes care of most of these elements. But say for instance, if I have a mobile device and portrait, I might want to move an important field up to the top or otherwise rearrange and optimize the layout.